Welcome back, ScreenCrush. I'm Ryan Airy. How about that ending, huh? That was, it's wild. It's pretty wild. So, Marc gets popped in the chest. He falls into a pool of water and he just dies. Then he sinks into what looks like the sunken place from Get Out. Cut to Marc in a mental institution surrounded by all the people that he's met in the show. And boom, Steven is there too, and now Marc and Steven are finally together in the same space. What's going on? Did the multiverse of madness come early? And then Hippo Lady shows up. What the fish is going on here?
Enough of this! Tell me what's happening. What is this?
We've got to make sense out of all this craziness. Now, we made a video yesterday about how this whole show could have all been in his head. But now, let's look at it the other way. What if this whole ending, the psychiatric hospital, everyone else that's there, what if all of that is in Marc's head? Like some kind of Inception dream or coma hallucination. If it's all in Marc's mind, then why is he manifesting this institution while he's hanging between life and death? Is this delusion part of Marc's dissociative identity disorder? Or is there something far more sinister going on here? Well, there is so much to unpack about episode 4's ending, so let's try to solve this puzzle.
We don't live in a material world. We live in a psychic world.
Everything that happens after Marc is shot feels like a Twilight Zone episode. It's like that coma dream that Tony has in The Sopranos. The mental hospital, the patient, Steven, all of it must be part of some subconscious hallucination. None of this is real, it's only happening in Marc's head. The biggest clue that all of this is taking place in Marc's mind is Steven.
How is this possible? I don't know.
The two personalities share the same body. The only way the two of them can converse in the real world is through reflections. And that is only possible because of their DID. When Steven sees Marc in mirrors, he's not really there. It's just a projection of his mind. Now, in the comics, the only times Marc ever occupies the same physical space as his alters is when he meets them in his mind. So, unless the show takes a drastic turn with Moon Knight, all of this is happening within Marc's brain. And that does not mean that it's not real. After all, perception is reality.
This pen, right? To me, this is a writing utensil. To my dog, it's a chew toy.
Marc is in a state between life and death. In the real world, Marc is lying in a pool, dying from 2 gunshot wounds. But his consciousness has been sent into a coma. So, why is Marc's mind projecting this crazy death dream reality? Why send himself into a mental institution? Why is Layla and everyone else there too? Why would his mind convince himself that everything he has experienced was a fabrication created by his mental illness?
Yeah, answer those questions. Why all those things?
Well, Doug, our minds protect us from severe traumas. Marc's life is filled with psychic anguish. He suffered from dissociative identity disorder for years, maybe since childhood.
He is in agony. More pain than anyone could bear.
Now, his condition has actually been deteriorating from the first episode. The barriers between his personalities have crumbled. Marc and Steven were supposed to occupy the body at separate times, but now they share it simultaneously.
We've always managed to keep a wall between us, but something's changed.
Steven was never meant to be aware of Marc, and now that he knows, they are constantly fighting for control of the body.
Hey person, your beard is looking very trim these days.
Wow, thanks Doug. I always try to stay trim. Sometimes it's actually hard for guys to keep all the areas of our bodies nice and groomed.
Oh, you don't have a groomer?
No Doug, I am my own groomer, but Manscaped makes that easy. They're the sponsor of this video.
What is a Manscaped?
Well, Manscaped is a men's hygiene and grooming company, and they sent me a bunch of stuff in this awesome all-in-one performance package. By far, my favorite thing in this package are the trimmers. This is the lawn mower body trimmer with ceramic blades and a guard that keeps me from cutting my most personal areas. So this trimmer is waterproof, plus it has an LED light so you can see in the shadowy nether areas where you might be trimming. It also has this charge meter so I know exactly how much juice is left. And there's also this travel lock, tap 3 times to make sure it doesn't accidentally turn on in a suitcase. Just gonna place this on charge. Now the performance package also came with 2 products to help with body odor protection. We have the Crop Preserver deodorant and the Crop Reviver ball toner spray. It's very refreshing.
And I'm loving every minute of it.
And we also have the Weed Whacker nose hair and ear hair trimmer with the same skin-safe tech as the lawnmower trimmer, so you don't tug on your nose hairs. And for a limited time, you get all of this plus 2 free gifts. We have the Shed travel bag and these Manscaped anti-chafing boxer briefs. Just click the link in the description to get 20% off plus free international shipping. Plus, you get these 2 free gifts when you enter the promo code ScreenCrush at checkout. Back to Moon Knight. Not to mention the whole Khonshu business. Mark is the avatar of a god. He fights monsters. He must save the world from a cult worshipping a goddess. And then Mark had to face Layla and tell her the truth about his role in her father's death, understanding that things will never be the same between them.
That's the reason that we met. You just had a guilty conscience.
And after he was so sure he succeeded in stopping Ammit, he gets shot, falling to his death. Now, of course, there is immense pain when 2 bullets pierce your chest, but in Mark's case, being shot is tied to a pre-existing psychological trauma. When Mark confesses to Layla about his role in her father's death, he reveals that his partner shot him.
He shot me too. I was supposed to die that night, but I didn't die that night, and I should have.
He would have died if not for Khonshu. That's where his life took an extreme turning point. Mark must be suffering from PTSD, and those memories are a powder keg, vibrating with intense mental strain. Being forced to relive those traumatic memories and then being shot, it's just too much. When Mark falls to his death, he experiences both the physical trauma of being shot and, at the same time, plunging back into the traumas that led him to become Moon Knight, the gunshot wounds that festered into mental scars that drove him into a nervous breakdown. That is immense stress for anyone to deal with. So much anxiety is extremely unhealthy for Mark, who is already suffering from a crippling mental disorder. A complete mental breakdown was inevitable, and that's what's happening in episode 4. In his dying moments, Mark's mind shielded him from the trauma, plunging his consciousness into a protective hallucination, a fantasy world that regresses Mark from the truth.
Invented a make-believe world to help you deal with the trauma you endured.
But why would his mind use a mental hospital as a defense mechanism?
Well, Doug, it's because it's the only alternative that can protect Mark's mental being from fracturing completely.
Control can sometimes be an illusion, but sometimes you need illusion to gain control.
His life is an insane existence. It's suffocating, an inescapable prison, a constant torture for both Mark and Steven. With such an absurd life, isn't it simpler to believe in a more rudimentary reality? That he's just mentally ill and that everything he experienced was a fabrication caused by his disorder.
When the human mind is faced tremendous emotional pain, it has no choice but to protect itself.
In the mental hospital, he is not the avatar of Khonshu. He's not on a mission to save the world, and he's certainly not Moon Knight. The mental institution represents a reality where Mark is free from the extreme burdens of his life. This is the ultimate defense mechanism. And that's really tragic. It just shows us how broken Mark is. That deep down, part of him feels safer in this illusion than he does facing the real world. This is also why many of the people in Mark's life appear in the hospital. Mark's mind projects them as patients and doctors to maintain this lie. It's his subconscious reassuring him that his life was all a lie.
But then why does he try to run from this reality instead of embracing it?
Well, because Mark's consciousness is rejecting the reality that his subconsciousness has created for him. He's still clinging to his old life. Mark can't just forget about his real life, so his mind puts all those things in a different perspective.
Because building a dream from your memory is the easiest way to lose your grasp on what's real and what is a dream.
Now, we cannot talk about this episode without also talking about one of the best Moon Knight stories from the comics. The show is heavily influenced by Jeff Lemire's amazing run, and that story gives us some hints about what we can expect from these final 2 episodes. After years of serving as the Fist of Vengeance, Mark's mental state becomes completely unstable, bringing him to a breaking point. Mark wakes up in a mental hospital, similar to the one in episode 4. As Mark goes through a psychological journey, he discovers that Khonshu was the one that creates this illusion. Khonshu claims that the whole thing is a trap and that his plan is to break Mark completely and take over his body. However, in truth, Khonshu's intent was to fix Mark in the most rudimentary way. The god doesn't really understand Mark's condition, so he thinks that he can be repaired like a broken shelf or something. It is then that the story shifts into a powerful journey of self-discovery. Mark confronts his past, rediscovers his repressed memories. He understands that he has been suffering from DID ever since he was a child. Mark learns to accept his flaws and illness. Instead of fighting his alters, he embraces them. And by the end of the story, Mark becomes whole. This odyssey is about self-acceptance. Now, based on episode 4, this is exactly where the MCU is going with Moon Knight, is Mark's journey of self-discovery and acceptance. And that's what episode 5 will probably be about. It's going to be the episode where all the secrets are revealed. We will finally see Mark's origins and get answers to all our questions.
It's the question that drives us. It's the question that brought you here.
The mental hospital is a fever dream, a maze representing Mark's complex psyche. The only way to escape the maze is self-discovery. When Mark and Steven traverse the maze, they will uncover the truth about their mental illness and about who they really are. They will learn about their repressed memories and traumas. Mark will uncover the origins of his DID, the creation of Steven, and why he gave away control of his body to this alter. And Steven will face an identity crisis as he discovers that his whole life was a lie, that he is an alter created by Mark's DID. Now, this might be obvious to us as the viewers, but Steven still believes that his life is real and that Mark is the alter. It's going to be very interesting to see how Steven reacts to the discovery.
It's been you, it's always been you. Eating away parts of my life like a parasite.
Will Steven rebel and fight Mark for control of the body, or will he accept that he is an alter? And will Mark and Steven, who clashed with each other from the start, find a way to coexist in harmony? Also, there is the mystery third identity. Now, we've theorized about this previously in a couple of videos, and since episode 5 is the big one, it only makes sense that Jake's personality will finally be revealed. Jake Lockley is 100% inside that third sarcophagus. Now, as we explained in this video, the Jake personality is going to represent Mark's vicious and murderous nature. That's a whole other layer for Mark's self-discovery, the realization that he's sharing his body with a killer.
Steven, what did you do? I swear it wasn't me.
Then who was it? Me.
Not to mention that when Jake is released, he will surely clash with Mark and Steven and attempt to take control of the body for himself. That means that Mark and Steven are going to have to team up against Jake. The question about Mark's psychological odyssey is how it's all going to change him. Will he come out of this as someone who is whole and is able to live his life with his illness and his alters? Or will he be broken completely and Mark will metaphorically die inside his own mind?
If we get killed, we'll be lost in limbo till our brains turn to scrambled egg.
It's very possible that the shocking twist of the show is that Marc Spector will die.
Look, I wish I could just disappear. I really do. But unfortunately, I'm still here.
Be careful what you wish for.
And that will mean the show will end with Steven taking control over the body and become the prime identity. Since the show puts Steven front and center, it does make sense thematically, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's the direction that the MCU goes with. But let's not forget that Mark was also shot twice. He's dying, so no matter what's happening inside his head, his body won't survive for long. So, how will he survive that? Well, that is where Hippo Lady comes in. She is Taweret, one of the Egyptian deities, and the reason she's there is most likely to save Mark from death. The other gods imprison Khonshu, but clearly some of them see that Harrow is lying to them about his intentions.
I was in the desert, but if visiting the sands were a crime, the line of sinners would be longer than the Nile.
You lie! You're a f***ing liar!
Yatzil helped Mark in episode 3, and now Taweret has entered Mark's mind to help him return to the land of the living. And, since she is a goddess, I assume that she or one of the other gods can save Mark's life. But before the body can be saved, the mind must heal. And as Harrow keeps saying,
I can't save anyone who won't save themselves. I can't help you if you don't help yourself. If you don't help yourself.
The only person that can heal Mark at this point is himself. Or, I guess in Mark's case, it's Steven and the other alters.
Have you ever had a dream, Neo, that you were so sure was real? What if you were unable to wake from that dream? How would you know the difference between the dream world and the real world?
But there is another, darker alternative to all this. Maybe this isn't just a fever dream that Mark's mind has created in his final moments. Maybe this asylum was actually created by Harrow and Ammit to control Mark. Before he wakes up in the mental hospital, Marc is shot by Harrow. And remember, Marc was surrounded by a bunch of Harrow's cultists. And as capable as Layla is, I doubt that she could beat them all and take Marc to safety. So that means that Harrow has Marc's body, while he's trapped in a coma. In the mental institution, Harrow appears as the doctor in charge of the place. He's the therapist that tells Marc that everything he experienced was a lie. When Harrow delivers Ammit's judgment, there is magic involved. Well, magic or some other godly mystical power that's given to him by the staff of Ammit. With Ammit's power, Harrow sees a person's past, and I think future too, and thus he judges their worth.
Well, isn't that a bit dodgy, like trusting the judgment of a weird crocodile lady?
He did that to Steven in episode 1, and in this episode he reveals that he knows everything that Marc did, including being involved in the death of Layla's father. Now Harrow could be using that gift of foresight on Marc while he's in a coma. Harrow is a charismatic cult leader. That's probably how his cult grew so large. So maybe the staff also grants him some magical brainwashing powers. When he uses Ammit's judgment, he peers into a person's mind. Maybe he can use this ability to nudge a person's mind to join his cause. After all, he can absorb people's life force and summon death jackals. So magical brainwashing is not off the table.
That you didn't even think to plead your case with them first before you asked me to brainwash the entire world?
So this means that while Marc is in a coma, Harrow is using Ammit's power to brainwash him in his dream state. So, is this hospital the work of Marc's mind or Ammit's power? Probably both. Meaning, Marc's mind sends him into the hallucination, but then Harrow manipulates it with Ammit's power. And also, if the staff can take people's lives, surely that means it could also grant them life. Meaning that Harrow could be giving Marc his life back, but with the caveat of Ammit's influence on his mind.
But why would Harrow brainwash Marc instead of letting him die?
Because Harrow is a cult leader. People like him love to control others with their brainwashing. Cult leaders need to have power over their followers. They crave it. He wants to brainwash Marc to break his psyche so he can turn him into a blank slate so he can remake him as a follower of Ammit. It's also possible that Ammit needs something from Marc. Maybe the key for her freedom is locked somewhere inside his mind. Harrow said that the other gods betrayed Ammit, locking her inside a prison. Now, since Khonshu is the only god that's trying to stop Ammit, I assume that he was one of the gods who betrayed her. It's also possible that he took some precautions to ensure that she will stay locked, even if, say, her cultists attempted to free her. If that's the case, then Harrow would not be able to unleash Ammit on the world, even if he has her statue. Khonshu is the one person who has the final piece of this puzzle, the knowledge of how to free Ammit. And since Khonshu occupied Marc's mind for years, that knowledge has been planted deep inside Marc's consciousness.
And in this mind is the key, my key.
This is why Harrow inceptioned himself into Marc's coma dream. He needs that key to free Ammit. Now either way, if the mental hospital is a manifestation of Marc's mind, or if it's created by Harrow, episode 5 is shaping up to be the integral episode of the show. We are finally going to get all of our questions answered. So what do you think about all this? Is it happening to Marc's mind? Is it something else completely? Let me know in the comments below, or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, welcome. It's really good to have you. I think you'll like the channel. We do a lot of cool stuff. So please subscribe and hit the bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.